Hello, and welcome to Hedgehog Storytime, where I read my weird original fiction. The following story is part of the Mayhem Cerebrum project, linked to the playlist in the description below. Yes, you have to read them all. No, that is not a request. This story is definitely like a later addition to the plot. I don't remember how I came up with the idea, but I thought it would be kind of fun, and also it would serve a very important purpose. I feel like there were a couple of plot points in the first chapter of Mayhem Cerebrum that I thought were relatively obvious, and some people got them. I've confirmed that some people have got them, but some people definitely didn't. And so this episode also serves as to kind of confirm one or two things, at least indirectly. So I think this will clear some things up. I think this will clear some things up for a couple of people. So without further ado, here is Looks Like Rain, Part 1. Valky had been wandering. She didn't know quite how long. Her last orders from the Morrigan had been to stand by in case the situation with O'Keen and the Borisov boy happened to change. And so she had been listless. Valky didn't know what to do without any orders. She had been thinking, recently, as she observed the states of realities both stable and crumbled. Valky wasn't used to that. She was a doer, not a thinker. It was her opinion that thinking too much wasn't healthy. That's how you got people like Bake. Maybe if there'd been less thinking, O'Keen would be here with her now. He'd know what to do. He'd know how to sort out her head, filled with not only the memories of him, but also of the Borisov boy, the ones that were not hers. Yet even if they weren't, she couldn't understand the tight feeling that crept into her chest whenever she recalled them. It almost made her want to go to him, to ask him to give her an order. But she wasn't the person he was looking for her to be. And he could never be O'Keen. Everything had been easier before O'Keen had gone. If she had to think, she tried to think of those memories. Back when she'd had a purpose. When there had been an evil to defeat and a cosmos that needed protecting. Back during the war. Most people who were there didn't remember it fondly, and she was embarrassed to admit that she did. So she drifted for a while longer, recalling those days she had spent with O'Keen, saving the universe. Bake was late, again. It had gotten to the point that they'd started telling him they were meeting 20 minutes early in the hopes that it would even out. But he was, unfortunately, smarter than that, and so had been making a habit of showing up even later out of spite. So when he finally did stroll through the door to the war room, Valky and O'Keen had already sat there for a good 15 minutes. Valky was nearly visibly fuming. She had never gotten used to Bake's general attitude, and on principle, she never would. O'Keen was less bothered. He wasn't as rigid as Valky was, and though he was still annoyed, he knew that getting upset was giving him exactly what he wanted. Because ultimately, the tardiness was a form of rebellion for Bake, the only one he could really perform at this juncture. It was the one way to express his displeasure at being roped into a war that, at the end of the day, he had never really intended to take part in. He thought that since the Morrigan's deal had been with the trickster, that he shouldn't be held accountable for it. She disagreed. And since he no longer had the ability to contend with her, here he was, strolling in 40 minutes later than they'd told him to. Yet despite that, he still didn't look happy. "Where's the old hag?" he grumbled. "She's even later than I am." "She's very busy," Valky growled, what with keeping the malice from entirely remaking the cosmos and all. "She doesn't have time to wait around for you." "Well, maybe I don't have time to wait for her either. Ever think of that?" Scoffing, Valky crossed her arms over her chest. "And what is it you could possibly be doing?" "Something that's not this." O'Keen sighed. Inevitably, he was going to have to stop them again. He opened his mouth to do so, but it turned out not to be necessary. "And you will have nothing to do at all, when the cosmos as we know it ceases to be." The room darkened slightly, and when they turned to the empty side of the table, it was quite obviously no longer empty. A cloaked figure sat in the chair, the hood completely covering her face, save for a pair of nearly blue lips, which were currently pursed in displeasure. O'Keen and Valky sat straighter. Bake just sighed. "At this point, it might be nice, the way you've been running me ragged." "Ah, of course. That reminds me. You are supposed to report on the status of the Volk. Bake looked thoroughly unamused at being blown off. He says he's bored. He's back in his cave napping. Could we potentially make him another ally? The Morrigan probed. I wouldn't count on it. He claims he's over the whole thing, but I think O'Keen's little stunt made him skittish. O'Keen's eyebrows furrowed. All I did was grab a tooth. Next to him, Valky was desperately trying to maintain a stoic expression. The Volk may seem a monster, the Morrigan explained, but he is little more than a beast. The instant circumstances don't favor him, he's liable to retreat. Well, at least that's one less enemy we have to worry about. O'Keen shrugged, almost looking a little embarrassed. The Morrigan leaned back, her lips parting thoughtfully. Then with the last variable sorted, this may finally be the moment to counterattack. You're talking about the factory, aren't you? Valky asked, and the Morrigan nodded. Both of the Seraphim fell into contemplative silence, but Bake just looked confused. He glanced back and forth between them all. The Hanama what? He asked, when he realized that no one was going to explain. You really need to bother showing up to more of these meetings, O'Keen sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose in exasperation. Why bother when most of them are boring as fuck? Then why are you here right now? Valky stood, her eyes dangerous. Because your boss would rip my dick off if I wasn't, and that's the one thing I happen to like about being stuck in a disgusting sack of meat. I don't suppose you'd like to be informed on the subject we were actually discussing, the Morrigan interrupted quietly, her tone irritated. Not really, but sure, enlighten me. Bake leaned so far back in his chair that two of the legs left the ground and he almost flipped it over. His antics went ignored. The factory is the reality where the Malice is creating his army, the Morrigan explained patiently. But Bake still frowned. But he can just make shit whenever he wants, so I have something else do it for him. The same reason anyone builds a factory, I imagine. O'Keen shrugged. Efficiency. Somehow, he'd utilized his ability in its creation. It can produce hundreds of terrible ideas every day. Oh, that's bad. 'Cause you can't do that, can you? Well, I may have a rather large quantity of souls at my disposal. My powers have been all but spent. O'Keen was the last Seraphim I'll create for a long time. So you've got a limited, dwindling soldier count while he can just keep cranking them out day and night. O'Keen frowned, his expression grave. So you can see why taking out the factory is our first priority. Okay, but he's gonna have thought about that. My scouting mission revealed that the factory is indeed heavily guarded, Valky reported. It seems a good third of the troops he's making never leave the reality at all. So if we want to take it, it's going to cause heavy losses, which we certainly can't afford. O'Keen's gaze darted here and there, trying to sort out the problem. Which is why we're going to take a different tact. It seemed, however, that the problem needed no sorting, as the Morrigan already had the solution. He's expecting an army. He might not be as prepared for an infiltration. So you're going to go all guerrilla warfare on his ass. Bake made some wild hand gestures while O'Keen leaned back thoughtfully. Who are you sending? Why, you three, of course. She seemed nearly amused. I can only trust the best for this important mission. Of course, my lady, I would be honored. Valky chimed in immediately. O'Keen didn't look so sure. I understand the sentiment, he began, but we also happen to be highly recognizable. We are, after all, public enemy number 1 to him. Bake, who had been struggling for words this entire time, nodded vigorously. While that may be true, who said anything about being recognized? The Morrigan's head cocked slightly. The other three looked confused. So she continued, Why, we have a man in our presence who can make a room believe they're seeing anything at all. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Bake interjected. If you're suggesting what I think you are, then you're dunking your wieners in some real hot oil there. Whatever do you mean? The Morrigan asked primly, thinking that he was about to say something incredibly stupid. You could just make yourself invisible to the eye, correct? Not as far as I'm aware. I can't make everyone not see something that's right in front of them, only see it as something else, and there's a reason why I never do that thing I do on myself. It doesn't just make folks see things, it makes them believe it too. The others all straightened a bit, realizing that he was actually saying something important. So if you're about to say, oh, you can just disguise yourselves as parts for the grinder and the flesh creatures will take you all in, then you're crazier than I am. I convinced myself I'm a non-sentient pile of meat, and there ain't no going back. A pile of meat I shall remain. The delusion wears off pretty quick if I'm there to maintain it, but if I'm someone else, well, then I'm not really there at all, am I? What if you became something sentient? Okine asked. Could you pull yourself back? Remember who you are? Bake scrunched his face. Maybe. Nobody else could, but if I got lucky, yeah, I might be able to. You're going to have to, the Morgan intoned. It's the one thing he won't be expecting. Wait, I'm confused. Bake frowned. What exactly are you insinuating I should turn into? I'm trying really hard to be the dumbass who's not getting what you're putting down, but I'm really not going to like the answer, am I? Most certainly not. The Morgan smiled. The creature lumbered along, sometimes on 2 legs, sometimes on 4. Its body was amorphous, more a concept than an actual being. Its flesh rippled like water, and so it tumbled along, dragging its burden behind it. In 2 tentacle-like appendages, it gripped the wagon firmly. It was not a struggle to drag it. The creature had no musculature to speak of, so there was no strain. Its flesh adhered to the metal handles of the wagon, and away it went. Though it wasn't sure where it was going, it continued forward regardless, towards some distant destination. In the brief moments here and there when it possessed a nose, it took in the sickly sweet odor of its cargo. It didn't bother looking back. Every once in a while an eye would emerge from the back of its head and briefly observe the pile of limbs, organs, and other miscellaneous bits of flesh that were openly rotting in the wagon behind it. The creature didn't think too much of them. To it, they were simply materials to be delivered. Ah, right. There was its destination. The loose cobblestone road that floated over the roiling greens and purples folded into a translucent bubble ahead of it, through which not much could be seen through the thick haze of smoke. The creature was able to straighten now and walk mostly on 2 feet as the road was much less lumpy when actually held together by gravity. Though it didn't have lungs per se, it instinctively tried to hold its breath as it passed through the barrier. If it had ears, they would have popped as gravity suddenly asserted itself. Its grip on the wagon had to increase as friction became a force to be fought against. It wasn't harder to pull, just an adjustment that had to be made. Though the smog was still thick, it cleared a little up ahead, to reveal a sky stained a deep red. The vibrant ether cast the numerous smokestacks in shadow. With the great scraping, grinding noises emerging from somewhere deep within the interior, the entire structure seemed more like some screeching, dying beast than the lifeless machinery it truly was. The creature didn't think much of this either. It didn't really have the capacity for metaphor, but it did detect an odd sense of tension in the air. Still, it journeyed ever onward, joining the line of wagons slowly being dragged towards the factory. Though straight, the path ahead of it was long, and as it continued, the factory only grew larger and larger, until eventually it nearly blotted out that angry sky altogether. Ahead of it, the line was lumbering through the enormous double doors, the metal simultaneously rusted and dripping with grease. As each of the wagons passed under its hulking frame, a series of beeps were directing them to their final destination. The creature didn't consider it until it sat under the scanner and realized that it didn't actually know what the beeps meant. It should know this. It felt that it should, but it didn't. There was an odd sense of disconnect. For just a moment, it felt like it was something else entirely. Though it didn't come from the beeping, the creature did get a distinct feeling of instruction. It knew that it had something it had to do. It was filled with a sudden sense of urgency. It needed to get inside this factory, and more importantly, it needed to not be suspected. Suspected? Of what? It couldn't be sure, but it continued straight forward, trying to look like it knew where it was going. Directly ahead of it were a series of curving hallways, more like ant tunnels than man-made metal. It would quickly find itself lost, but at the moment, that's exactly what it needed. Someplace no one would see it. It continued further, its burden growing heavier by the minute, past countless pipes groaning and spewing steam, past crunching gears and whirring pistons. It took as many turns as it could. Finally, it could no longer pull the wagon any further. It struggled a few more steps forward, then stopped, panting heavily. Motherfucker! It burbled through an orifice that was quickly growing to resemble a mouth. You people need to cut a few pounds! He felt his flesh rapidly solidifying. It was a wildly unpleasant feeling, and induced a moment of supreme confusion as his mind slid back into place. His mouth tasted like licorice, and he smacked his lips repeatedly, realizing that he had lips. Bake, yes, that was his name, he was pretty sure, sighed. Once more, he was chained to the flesh. Honestly, if he wasn't so afraid of losing himself permanently, he might do this more often. Besides, the one thing he'd want to be couldn't be imitated anyway. He didn't even exist anymore. Ugh. He shook his head, trying to clear it. A sudden spurt of steam right next to his ear shocked him fully back to himself. Right, he didn't have time to disassociate. He had two idiots that were still stuck as a cart full of flesh bits. Now that he was back, the delusion would fade naturally, and he considered letting them suffer a little longer for putting him through all of this, but they wouldn't even realize that any additional time had passed, and every second he waited was a potential second for him to be caught. So he snapped his fingers, and with one blink the wagon was suddenly full of two seraphim, all tangled up and both looking horrified. Bake was a little taken aback by their sheer panic, but then laughed. All right, you guys don't know what not existing feels like. And you do? Valky tried very hard to keep herself together. Can't say that I do, but unlike you two, I can easily imagine it. Valky, never one for deep thought, recovered quickly and stood, turning back to offer Okeen a hand. He was still gaping like a fish a little, but her touch seemed to kick him back into gear. Well, Bake stretched, trying to get the last little bit of stiffness out of his muscles. Ugh, still hated that he had those. That's my part of the plan, so where are we going? The two seraphim climbed out of the cart and tried to get their bearings. First of all, where even are we? Okeen asked, still looking a little out of sorts. Bake just shrugged. Beats the hell out of me. I half remember stumbling through the front door and trying to get lost in a weird little corner so nothing would see us morph in front of their very eyes. All things considered, that might not be so odd around this place. Okeen mumbled. The Morgans sensed something very powerful at the center of this factory. Valky got right to business. Odds are that if we destroy it, the factory goes down as well. She started walking, forcing Okeen and Bake to hurry after her. So what? Bake asked. We're supposed to wander around till we just happen to trip over the damn thing? We weren't able to do much reconnaissance, Okeen admitted, but the whole factory seems to be laid out circularly with everything converging in the center. So we follow the machines, we find the core or whatever? That's the thought, at least. Great. Ahead of them, Valky paused and held up a hand. The narrow tunnels finally widened out, and she was glancing cautiously through the opening. Bake tried to lean out to look, but Okeen pulled him back against the wall, waiting for Valky to give the okay. After a tense minute, she did, and the three emerged into a hot, humid room filled with all sorts of incomprehensible gizmos and lumps of machinery. The very air itself seemed dyed a shade of vivid orange and smelled like blood. Dominating the center was a large conveyor belt that trundled noisily along. From where they entered, it seemed to mostly be transporting the parts that the creatures had been carrying inside. There were not only human parts, but as the conveyor merged with several others, animal parts, mechanical and metal devices, and other miscellaneous materials joined the fracas. They were run through several machines, and as they continued, each one seemed to be sticking some of those materials together in ways wholly unsavory. So he's using all those parts, right? Bake broke the silence, but I thought he could just make anything whenever he wants. That's the idea, I think. Okeen frowned, seeming a little confused himself.
You know, that's a good question.
The three of them froze in place, not even daring to swivel their heads to look for the source of the new voice. They all knew there was probably no point anyway. The voice laughed.
Man, you guys look so surprised. I mean, come on. Did you really think you were going to sneak into my territory and I wouldn't notice? I've got eyes all over the place.
With a horrifying squelch, several very human-looking eyes suddenly opened along nearly every surface large enough to produce them. Bake dared to turn his eyes just enough to see that on the ceiling, a pair of lips had also formed. Currently, they were giggling.
Get it? Eyes all over?
Yet the voice was only met by a now slightly more defiant silence.
Well, I thought it was pretty funny. But regardless, how did you people manage to get in here? I swear I'd look away for 1 minute and I missed all the good stuff.
Frankly, Okeen finally broke out of his frozen state. I don't think that's any of your business.
Not telling? Well, I'll just get it out of you later. Now, let's see who we've got here. Generic Seraphim number 517. That bright young up-and-comer who got lucky and stabbed a filthy traitor for me. And, oh! Well. The pathetic, squishy remains of the loser himself.
Bake's fists clenched, but for once, he didn't say anything.
And, wait, is that really it? Just the three of you? Wow, What a pathetic guerrilla operation. Is this really everything the Morrigan's got left?
You're going to eat your words soon enough, Valky spat.
Sure, keep dreaming. Anyway, I'm going to capture you now.
Right on cue, several of the shapeless creatures emerged from all directions, and the floor began bubbling and frothing as hands burst from its surface. On the conveyor belt! Okeen shouted as the three struggled to get away from the grasping hands. They were beginning to pop out of the rubber as well, but more slowly, and there was nowhere else to go. The two Seraphim leapt to action, hopping onto the belt and sprinting ahead. Though he was taller than both of them, Bake proved slower. He had trouble navigating all the shit already on the conveyor belt, let alone all of the machinery that periodically interrupted it. Okeen finally noticed that he was lagging behind and called out to Valky, but it was then that one of the spreading hands latched onto Bake's foot and he fell forward, bouncing slightly on the rubber. Unsure of what to do, Okeen froze. Go on, you dumbass, Bake shouted back. I can't just leave you. They'll give you some breathing room if they have me. You're not the one he's really after anyway. Okeen struggled with himself for another second. Then Valky called to him and he shook himself, running after her. Bake simply sighed and sat there as the numerous creatures slithered closer. They wouldn't attack him. The malice no doubt wanted him in one piece. But speaking of the bastard, he really wasn't looking forward to what came next.